All right, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to introduce to you today a Careers After Transfer panel, which is sponsored by the Honors Newsletter Club from the Sam Draper Honors Program at Rockland Community College. We have three really wonderful panelists today, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. And the purpose of this panel is to showcase a little bit about how we can move forward into the world of work after studying a wide variety of subjects at the undergraduate level. So there's not always a clear path forward, and each person who's going to speak with us today has a really unique story to share about how their goals evolved, how they decided to make these decisions moving forward into very unique careers. And so I'm really excited about a great conversation today. My name is Katie Lynch. I'm the chair of the honors program at RCC, and I'm going to start by introducing our first panelist, my wife, Jane Chen. Jane currently is a senior vice president at Live Nation, and she's going to tell us about how she got to that position in just a few minutes. It's a very long and convoluted path, actually. I'm privy to that information. And then also speaking with us, we have Jessie Sanchez. And Jessie is working currently at Culture Amp, but I know that that's not the first place you've worked. So we're going to hear a little bit about your journey as well. And then we have Derron Payne, who's a digital marketing analyst at Red Ventures. And Derron is an extra special panelist because he is an alum of the honors program. And so he actually started at RCC. Well, technically you didn't start your college journey at RCC even, which is part of your story, but came to RCC, graduated from RCC, and moved forward from there. So we have a wonderful, diverse group here. Two of our three panelists began at community college. That's also something great to know. So a lot of people in our panel have that same experience that we have. So let's begin with this first question. How, in brief, have you arrived at where you are right now? So take us from the end of college, your college experience, to your job right now. Just a brief description of what the steps were along that path. Jane, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. So my career journey began 25 years ago. I graduated from Harvard with a degree in East Asian Studies. And I took a job. My first job out of college was at McKinsey & Company, which is a management consulting firm. I was based out of their New York office, which was the largest office at the time. I didn't intend to live in New York, and here I am 25 years later, still in New York. McKinsey has a great business analyst program. It's essentially a 2 to 3 year program coming out of college. They know that the people coming into it have almost zero work experience, and they are more than willing to provide all of the training and the on-the-job experience necessary to do the work. And that's what I did. I think in the 2 years that I was there, I made great friends. I learned a whole lot about business. I also realized that I did not want to be a management consultant for the rest of my life. Coming out of Harvard, I think it was a little bit misleading. I think that Harvard has a very organized career trajectory program. Basically, in senior year, everybody kind of gets funneled into going to grad school, going to work, or doing something else. And Harvard is very, very good at bringing companies in to recruit out of the senior year. But you're also led to believe that there are only really two job positions available after college, and that would be management consulting and investment banking. I didn't think I wanted to do investment banking, so that's how I ended up in management consulting. However, after 2 years of management consulting, I thought, well, maybe I do want to do investment banking. So I took a job at Sanford Bernstein as an equity research analyst on the buy side, which is, if you're not aware, it's called Alliance Bernstein now, but it's essentially a mutual fund company. And I researched equities on their emerging markets fund for a couple of years, decided that I didn't want to do finance either. And I took a job at a startup where within maybe about a month, I was the CFO of the startup. It was that kind of startup. It also was a startup that did not last the dot-com bubble. So, but it was an interesting experience, and I enjoyed that. And that's when I made my first move into marketing. So I took a job at a digital strategy firm called KPE, which also did not survive. That one closed soon after 9/11. But that sort of started me down this marketing path, where I worked for a couple years before deciding to jump off of that bandwagon and make a feature film. So this was now 2004. My best friend, who was at Harvard Business School at the time, was miserable at Harvard Business School. She, instead of attending classes, was sitting in the back of the classroom writing a screenplay. And around Christmas time, after her, it's sort of halfway into her first year at HBS, she sent me a screenplay and said, "Well, what do you think about this one?" And I read it and I told her, "I think this is the one." We had always talked about making a film together as long as one of us wrote a screenplay, and she wrote it. And so I promptly quit my job, and Georgia dropped out of business school. And we embarked on sort of a 3-year epic journey of funding, producing, making, and then marketing a feature film. And the film is called Red Doors. It debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2005. And, we traveled the world with it, marketing it, selling it. After that was done, I decided that feature filmmaking was probably the best thing that I would never do again for the rest of my life. And it was the best experience I've ever had, but I would never do it again. And so I decided to go back into the corporate world. And that's when I got the job at Live Nation. And that was really through a relationship with a former boss. The boss that I worked for at one of the failed startups had just started a job at Live Nation. And I had coffee with him when I decided I was going to enter the workforce again. He was like, "Oh, well, I just joined this place called Live Nation. I think you'd be great at the job." I interviewed, I got the job. That was 12 years ago. And this is by far the longest I've ever worked anywhere. And that's where I am now. I am I work in the integrated marketing department of Live Nation, so not the sexy part of music, the money-making unsexy part of music. And I basically work with brands and sell sponsorships and advertisements around our concerts and festivals. And I've been doing it for 12 years. And it's just been good. I think, if I look back over my career, the thing that I was looking for was a blend of being able to be creative, but also being able to be analytical. And I think I have found that in my current job.
Thank you so much. I think, there's so much that I think we'll come back to about your story, about the importance of relationships, the importance of trying new things, taking risks, the importance of networking. There's just so much good there. I'm really excited now to hear from Jesse. So can you take us again toward the end of your college experience into where you are now?
Yeah, happy to jump off. So similar to a lot of you, I went to my local community college in Los Angeles, where I'm from. We had an awesome honors program there that I got to participate in. And so for me, I had kind of toggled between really wanting to just study the thing that interested me most, that was really kind of intellectual and academic, which was around sociology and public policy and social science. But I also had this interest in wanting to actually do things in the real world and actually kind of work in a business environment. And also I came from very humble beginnings. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school, came from an immigrant background. And so money was a significant factor and was kind of at tension with this idealist intellectual thread that I had in me as well. So I took some business courses in community college and switched my major for a short while, but figured I'd kind of take the passion route. And so I transferred from my community college to UC Berkeley, finished my 4-year degree in sociology and public policy. And I had this itch to really kind of live and experience the world beyond, California and the suburbs that I had grown up in. And I was really, really interested in international affairs and China specifically. I grew up in a very Chinese community in LA, actually. And so I studied abroad in China, and I would highly recommend for anyone, if you have the opportunity and you have the itch, and you're going to take on some debt, might as well have school pay for you to live abroad for a while. I got to go to Shanghai, and I really wanted to live and work in Shanghai. And so my college and university didn't necessarily have any great career tracking for roles outside of the US. But I networked really hard. I had a couple job offers in China, partly because I made a decision at my university to join a fraternity, which was part social experiment, but also part intentional kind of social capital building and networking. And there are some people who had some businesses in China. Ultimately, this is a journey. Life sometimes gets in the way of plans, which is fine. My family had some financial challenges, and I ended up coming back home from China after graduating for a little while to spend some time with them. And I ended up getting a job offer working for a nonprofit organization here in New York, which is how I kind of ended up from California to New York. I'm a big proponent of potentially working for free or even just volunteering for things that you really care about while you're in college to help build some potential pathways to work after college. And that's how this job offer manifested. I was a volunteer for this national youth mentoring and advocacy program at my college, specifically for kids with disabilities, specifically learning disabilities. And afterwards, the president in New York had called me and offered me a job. And I said, I'd love to go to a cool international place like New York City. And so that was more than 10 years ago. And I never thought I'd be in New York for more than 2 years. And here I am, married a New York girl and probably not leaving anytime soon. I learned pretty quickly working in the nonprofit sector that the work felt really meaningful, but sometimes it could be emotionally exhausting. And also sometimes doing work that was just so purely mission driven, it took some of the zest out of it and it made it just feel like work. Also, you're not really going to get super rich typically when you're doing direct service in a nonprofit environment. And so I got really interested in business and saw that as a great avenue to still have huge impact in people's lives. And I ended up taking on a contractor position at Google in New York City, working in corporate learning and development. And that was a really great experience. I got some awesome exposure to people at Google working all around the world, all kinds of jobs. And I highly recommend doing informational interviews with people who are doing jobs that you might be curious about one-on-one. That's how I became really interested in this idea of working directly with customers and representing your organization and doing account management and sales. But I also realized that I still wanted to be at that kind of scratch that impact itch that I had. And I saw that happening in startups. And so I worked at a startup. I actually got a recommendation from someone who became a mentor of mine at Google. She said, you should look into this fledgling startup here in New York called themuse.com. I'm an advisor there. I think you'd be a really good fit. I applied for a sales role there. And that's how I kind of started my career in software startup sales. I was there for about 2.5 years. Became a team lead role, got to understand a little bit about what it's like to kind of manage and coach people. And after a while, I decided I was ready for a move. And so I applied to a role as an account manager where I work now, which is another software company, software startup, also very international. It's based out of Australia, offices all over the globe. And I've been here for about 2 years now. So in my role, I'm basically working with a specific group of customers where I kind of own our relationship with them. I'm responsible for really understanding like how does their business and their team kind of use our software products? How does it make impact on their business? Give that information back to our product team to constantly improve our software. And then I'm really responsible for sales. So making sure that they're renewing their contracts with us, buying new cool products. So I'm happy to talk about all those things, but that's my story.
Thank you so much. From sociology to software. I love it. It's a great path and a very inspiring one for us. Derron, so for those of you who don't know Derron is an RCC alum. He graduated from RCC, and was it 2017, my friend? Has it been that long? That's amazing. So Derron, please tell us a little bit about your trajectory.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a lot, my story is I don't have as much like work experience as everyone else on the panel just yet. But I originally started with basketball being my like entire life. And that was like part of my decision to go to RCC. I was originally going to go to another school to play basketball there. And I went for a semester, things didn't work out. So I ended up transferring. ended up starting at RCC in 2015 to play basketball there. And the basketball thing, that was like what I was aiming for. I played on the team there. We did pretty well our first year. We went to like the regional conference championship. Everything seemed to be going really well there. And then like I met a professor after I changed my major, who sort of changed my life. I say it all the time, Professor Repick had like a huge impact on like changing the way I thought about things. Cause there was just like a lot of things that I didn't know about, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. Cause like I'm the first one in my family to like go to school. And ended up getting into the honors program. And then I got this really cool experience to like study abroad. So I'm gonna like piggyback off of Jesse's point, and like if you do have the opportunity to study abroad, I say 100% go for it, because I think that is one of the major deciding factors of what made me want to transfer to a school like Georgetown after, because that's where I transferred after. Just like because I got the opportunity to study abroad at Cambridge, and like being at a school like that with that history and just like seeing an institution like that, I never really had any experience with a type of institution like that. So it really changed my thinking, like opened up my mind, and like I wanted that again. So at RCC, I like was a double major with liberal arts and business. And also like coming from like a family background that didn't have a lot of money, when I realized that like I wanted to study a business, I was like, I'm gonna go, investment banking route. That's what I thought I wanted to do until I transferred to Georgetown. And piggybacking off of Jane's point now, schools like that, like they like being in the business school there, they definitely make you feel like there's only two career paths, like management consulting and like investment banking. So that is what I saw a lot of. And getting there originally, I was like, that's what I'm going to chase. And then I realized pretty quickly that I didn't think I'd be happy doing that. I really loved entrepreneurship. So I started like while I was at school, kind of like exploring different things in entrepreneurship that I could do. At Georgetown, I majored in management and marketing. But I started exploring things. Like I worked on a startup called Small Talk I co-founded with like another student at Georgetown. We like participated in pitch competitions, got into like a summer incubator program. And like I realized I really loved those experiences, and that was super cool. So after junior year, when everyone's like looking for like that major internship, because that's super important, that like what internship you get after your junior year matters a lot. I ended up going for a internship at a startup called Snacklands, which is a chip company that's like kind of getting bigger. It's actually pretty cool. Like when I worked there over the summer after junior year, the founder ended up getting on Shark Tank, and like I had to sign like an NDA that I couldn't say anything about it. And then like in the fall semester, I got to like watch them, like their episode air, and they like signed a deal with Mark Cuban, which was like super cool, because I was like, oh, I worked there, and like I got to like help the founder like prepare for like Shark Tank, which was super cool. There's not a lot of money in startups, in most startups, depending on like how it's starting. So like that was something that I realized after the summer too. When I was starting to think of like what career I'm gonna like try to pursue after college. It's like, I didn't come from money. Like I need money to like kind of help my family, and a startup might not be the route to start at. So I kept exploring, applying to different places. I ended up starting out at Red Ventures, which is a digital marketing company. I don't even know how to like really explain it. They've gotten so big at this point. They just essentially acquire a bunch of digital companies at this point. Like you may not have heard of Red Ventures, but you've probably heard of like companies they own, like the Points Guy, Bankrate, creditcards.com, things like that. Those are like places they own. And I started off there. My experience a lot different because I graduated in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. So I have never gotten to work in an actual office, which is a different experience. I think there's like pros and cons to it. I really like interacting with people. So that was hard for me, not being able to like see people and like kind of interact with them on a daily basis. Like, have lunch with someone. But what it did help with is you get like a lot more time at home to like, I mean, we're also in a pandemic, so you couldn't really go out. So like, I got a lot more time to like focus on like other small side projects that I wanted to work on, that kind of turned into much more than just side projects. I recently left Red Ventures to work on my own startup, The Art of the Pivot LLC. The name comes from a book that I wrote when I was in college. And I was able to like simultaneously like work on it while I was like working for like, was it like 10 months that I worked at Red Ventures? And then I was able to like I kind of took a risk and like jumped at it when I got a contract from Lenovo to like create content for them. And it's something that I'm like really passionate about, entrepreneurship, but also like motivational content for people who, kind of like I feel like what helped me a lot was the people along the way, like the honors program, the teachers, the professors that I've met. And I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have all these people like speaking into my life. And like, I feel like that's something that I want to give back. I feel like a lot of the reason why like people in certain communities don't get the opportunities to explore new or different things is just because they don't know, they don't have the awareness. So I got a really unique experience. My first contract for my LLC, which I was super excited about, is to create motivational content for students transferring from like community college to big universities, which I thought was right up my alley. So it was like pretty cool. But yeah, like that's where I am now. And that's like kind of how my like path, I have like this really weird path, a lot of internal conflict and things to decide to get there. But that's where I am now.
That is so awesome. And congrats on the new venture. That's so great. Derron, I had not realized that you had made that switch. How cool is that? So look, we've got 3 panelists, none of whom have a very straightforward path, right? And that's what we just heard. We heard all these different winding trajectories, ways of starting off points and taking risks and forging new relationships and parlaying old relationships into new opportunities. Those are the stories that we've heard. I want to really encourage our audience to put some questions in the chat if you have them. You're also welcome to raise your hand or unmute if you'd like, and I'll be happy to call on you. But I do have a little lightning round here while we're waiting to see if our audience has any questions. And I've got plenty in my back pocket too, so don't anybody worry. But my lightning round question is, what did you think you wanted to study before you got to college? Let's just take it away there. Derron, what did you think you wanted to study before you ever went off to college?
Basketball. It was engineering, but it was basketball, but engineering was the backup plan to make my parents happy. Like I needed to give them an answer because I wanted to chase basketball my whole life, and they were always, you need a backup plan. What if that doesn't work? What if you get hurt? I hated that question, so I was like, you know what, engineering, that'll shut them up. I didn't like engineering very much when I started college.
Great, that is an awesome answer. Thank you. Jesse, how about you? What when you entered college, what was your plan for a major? I know you majored in sociology. Was that the plan?
That was not the plan. No, community college is a really great opportunity for me to mature and also start to explore academically and intellectually. I had no idea what I wanted to do going into community college at all. I think there was we had to fill out a form graduating from college to tell our school what we were thinking. And I think I put down that I wanted to be a chiropractor. I grew up around a lot of holistic wellness and medicine and alternative medicine. I thought maybe that's something I'll put on this list here. That was way far from what I ended up pursuing.
Excellent. That's excellent. Thank you. Jane, how about you? What did you want when you entered college? What was your plan?
Yeah, I wrote all of my college application essays about being a biomedical engineer and wanting to be pre-med.
Excellent. So the reason I asked that question is to show you all, right, because we've got a wonderful audience comprised mostly of people who are currently in community college, that what you think you want now, right, what you thought you wanted when you got to RCC, what you think you want now may or may not be what you end up doing, and that's okay. You can still find success when you make these big changes. And we've had a few questions in the chat about how, how do you manage making those changes, those big changes that you've made, whether it's academic or career? Do you have any advice for, how to get through those moments where you're feeling a lot of stress about those changes? You're feeling like you're taking a risk and you're not sure how it's going to pay off. Any advice, motivational words, to Derron's point, for people who may be thinking about a big change? Anybody can jump in. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, looking backwards now at my trajectory, I was definitely very reactive constantly. Even in college, I changed my major 3 times in college. So I started out being pre-med, and that lasted 1 semester. That lasted through organic chemistry, and then I was no longer pre-med. And then I decided that I wanted to major in economics. So that actually lasted most of my college career. I started taking East Asian Studies classes 2nd semester freshman year out of interest. And I added that as a second major, sort of my sophomore year. And then when I was in my senior year and I had to write a senior thesis, I decided to drop the economics so that I could, I actually took all the courses necessary to graduate in economics, but I dropped the economics so I could write the thesis that I wanted to write my senior year. And all of that was just reactive. And similarly with jobs, like I don't think I ever had a career plan for myself. It was more, I wanted to try this, I wanted to try that. I didn't want to have FOMO, so I would do this and then I would switch again. Probably not the best way to navigate a career, but I've had 25 years to sort of meander my way around. And I would say that eventually I did land on something that fit me really well, but it was really a roundabout way of getting there.
Great, thank you. Any other responses to that question of, how did you navigate those big changes, whether academically or professionally or both? Go ahead, Jesse.
I think I had a couple very tactical things that I recall doing when I was in community college. And one of them, I feel like I need to start doing it again because it was so helpful then. I had really dropped off on the practice, which was journaling. I journaled a ton, specifically when I was in community college, on the topic of I think I was writing a lot about what did I care about at that point in my life? Who did I think I was becoming and wanted to become? What did I believe was true and why? I was really trying to figure all that stuff out, which I think is a constant lifelong journey. But the act of sitting quietly by myself and writing was really awesome. And I think helped me get a lot more clarity on some of those questions. And the other thing was just surrounding myself with the right people, making sure that I was kind of selective in a way around hanging around people who were really inspiring me and challenging me and were also really motivated and aspirational. I know myself, I tend to be I have a highly open personality type. I tend to be kind of really influenced by the people I'm around. So I learned that about myself and kind of used that intentionally. So that was one of the reasons why I joined the honors program and did every kind of overachieving type of activity that there was to do in community college, because I just wanted to be around other people who were trying to, one, get out of community college and make the most of their life, kind of moving on from there.
That's great. And, I think we'll come back to the importance of relationships and networking. There are a few other questions about that in the chat. Derron, how about you? Some of those big changes that you've navigated, from your focus on basketball to being focused on business to now focus specifically on entrepreneurship. How did you navigate those changes?
Yeah, I love that question a lot, specifically because I spent a year writing a book on making big changes. I think one thing about it, I'm very open to taking big risks. And to the outside, it may seem just crazy big risks, but one thing about me is they'll always be calculated. I think it's important to kind of research and really look into what you want to do. I think you can make any of these big changes work if you put in the research, do the research and see what it takes, see if it's actually something you want to go into. Any one of the decisions that I've really made, I've spent a significant time thinking about it, working out a plan to see exactly how to get from point A to point B. And it doesn't always work out exactly how you think it, but you need to think about it and make sure that you have a roadmap kind of listed out. So, okay, maybe I didn't go A, B, C, but I ended up at C. There was curves, but I kind of went over that in the roadmap, and I knew that that could happen. It makes it less scary, but also more achievable when you like kind of like look at other people who've maybe taken these changes before, who've done these things before. Just make sure you do your research and like put in the work to like for whatever change you want to make.
And, you know, Jesse spoke earlier about informational interviews, about, you know, sitting down, going out to coffee, or going, you know, having a Zoom meeting with people who are in the kind of role that you think you might want, talking to them about it. That's a great strategy too, to help you make that map. We had a great question in the chat about extracurriculars, and I know some of you have already talked about extracurriculars. What role did they play in your career journey specifically? Any really significant extracurriculars that helped you make those career decisions? Jane, you want to start?
Yeah, I know you want me to answer this one.
Yeah, I do. It's true.
So while I was at Harvard, the main extracurricular activity that I participated in was the Harvard Crimson, which is the daily newspaper at Harvard. I actually worked on the business side of the paper. I had done newspaper in high school, mainly on the editorial side, but when I got to Harvard, I'm not sure what it was that drew me to the business side, but that's the side that I worked on. I was, you know, starting second semester freshman year, worked at the Crimson my entire time. Probably, I would say, you know, if Derron was trying to major in basketball, I was definitely trying to major in the Harvard Crimson, and it did. It really changed my life in many ways. In one way, I'm pretty sure that because I was at the Crimson, because I was the business manager of the Crimson, which is the highest position on the business side of the paper, I think that's how I got my job at McKinsey. In fact, I'm pretty sure that is the reason why. McKinsey is very ultra selective, and you know, if it were based on GPA, I definitely wouldn't even have gotten an interview. But I think that my experience at the Crimson, the fact that I had essentially run $1 million business while I was in college, was what gave me that extra edge. That my GPA wasn't terrible, but it wasn't, you know, 3.9 or whatever it was that most of my other colleagues at McKinsey had. So that definitely made a huge difference for me.
Thanks. Anybody else have an answer to that about extracurriculars and their role in your finding your career or getting a job, as Jane just expressed? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I think it's super helpful in terms of one, networking, the people that you like meet from doing these clubs. One thing I will point out though is like I think you should truly, like when you're looking for extracurriculars, do what you think like you're interested in, like what's fun to you. Don't necessarily think career. I see it too many times, like, or at least at Georgetown anyway, I saw it too many times where there's like so many like pre-professional like clubs that are like really prestigious and hard to get into, and there's like this whole interview process. I was actually caught off guard with it when I first got there, because like you essentially feel like you're applying for jobs in some of them, and like a lot of people I see, like a lot of my friends were like stressed about it and stuff like that, and you end up like essentially like working a career while you're there. And like I really think you should do the things that interest you, because I feel like you're going to spend a lot of time doing it, and all of these extracurriculars look good no matter what they are. I think there's ways for it to help your career, like getting leadership roles eventually in these different clubs, no matter what they are. I am someone who like dipped my hand into like a lot of different buckets. So like I was in a lot of clubs, even back at RCC. And then when I got to Georgetown, it's like a tour guide, which is like one of the prestigious clubs at Georgetown. But I enjoyed that because I got to like talk to like a lot of people. And that's like something that's really cool to me, is like getting to like talk to people and like share my experiences. So I really enjoyed that. I was on the club basketball team. I was super passionate about that. And I think that helped me with like those two clubs specifically. It helped me with like leadership roles and being able to like communicate with people well, meeting a lot of new people. And then basketball, like kind of being, I always played point guard because I'm short. So like kind of being like that leader on the team, like I think that helped a lot in preparation for career-wise. But I recommend doing what you think you'll enjoy. You're gonna have all these years of work. Like you should truly look to do what you want to do when you're with your extracurriculars.
Great advice. And you also never know what will happen when you do, right? When you embrace those interests that you have, who will you meet? What opportunities will you get connected to that could lead into the workforce? Awesome advice. Jesse, I know you mentioned, studying abroad and how passionate you were about that. Do you have any other extracurricular experiences that you felt really prepared you well for the workforce or led you toward a particular position?
Yeah, it's interesting because I did a lot of extracurriculars. I feel like extracurriculars defined at least 50% of my college experience. Like I was very involved in a lot of things. And part of it was really intentional. Like once I had gotten to my 4-year transfer school, I was kind of tracking myself in a way to maybe pursue this career in public policy research or work at a think tank. And so I found some kind of selective programs at my school that I could apply to, like summer fellowships. I got to work in the California State legislature, things like that. Part of it was trying to be intentional and execute on that plan of this is what I think I want to do after college. But part of it was also like, these are things that I'm just super fascinated by. I'm satisfying my curiosity and demystifying this world to get some experience. Ultimately, they did partly intentionally and also partly unintentionally land me my first job after college. So one of the things I did was worked in the state, worked for the senator who was the chair of the state education committee in California. And I was also volunteering with this nonprofit. And that was really impactful for the leaders of that nonprofit to say, hey, after you graduate, we'd love for you to come work for us. Granted, that wasn't the policy route that I was really planning on, nor is it what I'm doing now, right? So just kind of goes to show you that like, I don't know, all those things may not necessarily like shape exactly what you're doing 10 years after college.
Yeah, but there's no harm in starting somewhere, right? And seeing what happens and learning about yourself and learning what you like in a job and then going on from there, right? Which is sort of all of your stories, I think, have that underlying message. Start somewhere, and put forth a good effort and then see what happens. And don't be afraid of when that changes. That's kind of what I'm hearing. We've got some great questions about finding jobs and networking. And also, Crystal added a little twist to this question, networking virtually. Do you have any advice for those kinds of practices? How do you go out there and find your first job or a new job? How do you do that networking, especially if maybe you're a little bit shy? Any advice there? Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I think in terms of networking, I think it's important to remember that that the people you're trying to network with are people too. I feel like when I got to Georgetown and like I started having those events where like big companies would like come on campus. I initially like went in there and like I'm like looking around because like I'm new there and don't really know how it works. And I think that helped me a lot because there were a lot of people who went in there and like, for some of the big banks, they went in with big technical things that they knew or like questions about that. And like, you're these people's break for a day. Like they see that all day, like they're normal people. And a lot of them like maybe went to Georgetown, they're coming back now, like talk to them about like, I would just talk to them about like normal stuff, primarily because I thought it was like bad on my part that I just didn't have the technical knowledge that I felt like all my peers had, but it ended up working out for me really well, where I just talked to them like normal people and like, what was your experience like at Georgetown? Like, oh, like I stay in Village A now. Oh, you did too your junior year, and like really connect with people like beyond their career and like get to know them for who they are. I think it really resonates with people. It makes you more likable and it makes them want to help you more. So I think that's like my major advice. And then in terms of like virtual, I think that's a struggle that like we all have to like deal with now. It's just important to realize it's like weird for everyone. So don't be discouraged by it.
That's great advice. Remembering the human behind, the position or the role that you're going for. Yeah. Any other thoughts on these questions about finding jobs, networking, et cetera? Jane, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'll say I saw somebody ask a question about what to do if you're shy. I'm fairly introverted. I don't consider myself a very good networker at all. And I can see how that could be a challenge when you're trying to get your first job. But I would just say that the thing that's helped me the most is just, performing. You never know when you're just doing something, doing your job, doing it well, doing it passionately, and that catches the eye of somebody else. When I was in college, I got called into a dean's office because actually it's Crimson related. We were delivering newspapers and the delivery person was like making a mess. And so I got called into the dean's office to talk about what we can do. It was like maybe a half-hour conversation. I didn't really think anything of it. It was just me doing my job. And a year later, when I was a senior and I was, looking to leave college, that dean actually ran into me in a courtyard and was like, "Hey, if you ever need a letter of recommendation, just hit me up." Like, I had a half-hour conversation with the guy. I didn't take him up. I wish I really did, but I didn't. And the thing is, I think if you are professional, I think if you're courteous, I think if you are passionate and and kind when you deal with people, you always have an opportunity to make an impression. Every other traditional networking type story I have has to do with me working with people and doing a good job at it. Me working with people and them enjoying working with me and wanting to work with me more. And that's how I got the job that I had now, is with the previous boss. So there are ways to network without actively going out there and pinging people you don't know. Or of course, if you can do that, I'm very jealous. That's also a great way, through LinkedIn and through other sort of, social, group message boards and things like that. That's not me, but just know that every time you're interacting with a person, you're actually networking with them. You just don't know it.
Great advice. And that goes for every level of an organization, right? The way you talk to a secretary, the way you talk to the person in the mailroom, right? That's all really important. You never know when something is going to be extra meaningful, and it's never a mistake to be kind, right? As you said. Jesse, any advice on this score?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be a pretty extroverted person. One of the reasons why I probably navigated towards sales and account management. I love relationships, and I just think people are really important and really interesting. And I think that type of attitude and orientation towards engaging with people has helped me a lot. But I think also like using a first connection to get to a second or third connection can be really, really helpful if there's someone at a company or doing a role or something that you really want to learn more about. I think it's great to put yourself out there, to be bold, to just ask. And, there's a lot of great blog posts and advice that you can get out there on like how to send a really thoughtful, short, concise LinkedIn message to folks. But I found it really rewarding and challenging going through that process of like, I don't know, having to constantly put myself out there. In some ways, I feel like once I found my way into sales, for example, like it helped me develop character to constantly deal with rejection and constantly reach out. So I think networking is good for you. I also think that like the best networking though is like, to Jane's point, it's when it's just really natural and authentic and you're having a real personal moment of interconnectedness with someone that's authentic.
Sounds like everybody's on the same page here. I really appreciate those examples. So, we've got just shy of 10 minutes left. We'll end a little bit before 1:30 because a few people have classes to get to. We have a couple questions for individuals. So Derron, this is a question for you. How much of a role has basketball played in your academic and career journey, right? Obviously, we know it was your passion when you started the college process, your passion growing up. How much of a role has it played into your experience in the workforce?
I think it's helped a lot. I think basketball has taught me, aside from what I mentioned about like able to learn how to like lead a team, I think it helps a lot with learning how to communicate with like a bunch of different people. But what I think the main lesson that basketball has taught me is like perseverance, to really like stick with something. Like I've played basketball since I was maybe like 3 and like on a team since I was like 7. And like, just really sticking with it pushing forward to like the next goal. I think basketball helped a lot. Also in terms of like how it still helps, it's still, and like always has been my entire life, a way for me to clear my head when things just when too much is going on. There's just so much like things going on around me. Going to a basketball court, putting up some shots is always been a way how I've cleared my head, and it helped get me through college, and it is helping me now career-wise. So basketball always been the love of my life.
That's great. That's amazing. So, it's therapeutic for you, right? The practice of it. And also it's given you these really wonderful ways of thinking about team and management and leadership. And that's really amazing. Jesse, a question for you. How do you feel like your experience at a nonprofit helped you in other areas of your career? You talked a little bit about that, but I think we'd love to hear a little more about that transition and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. It's not something I've reflected on a ton, but as I think about it, there are a number of very meaningful and consequential ways that my experience at the nonprofit really helped accelerate my career. I mean, first of all, working at a small nonprofit or a startup nonprofit like I did, you're entrusted with a ton of responsibility, and you just develop a ton of functional skills that you otherwise may not if you're going into like a typical role at a large company with a narrow, well-defined role. And I think that all of that functional experience that I had was the reason why recruiters kind of found me online and applied, asked or submitted me as an applicant to roles at Google, where I then went on to work. I also found that working in very mission-driven technology companies now, culturally, a lot of people really value, I think, the kind of cultural and values and attributes that I bring around service and being mission driven, and that part of my career, and that being part of my story. And even today, like I've stayed very involved with this nonprofit since I worked there. And 6 months ago, I joined their board of directors, right? And so now I'm having this really phenomenal career experience where I'm understanding what it's like to help this organization make decisions that are financial planning decisions for the next 5 years, or strategic product decisions for the next year. So I'm a big proponent of the nonprofit sector. And even if you don't work directly inside of a nonprofit, if you have the opportunity to just fill up your spiritual cup, on the side while you're doing your work, do it. Especially if you could join like an advisory board or a junior board or even a board of directors, then you'll get some really great experience. And so that's been huge for me. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, you're well, and Sam, thanks for a great question, Sam. Your answer too reminded me that at so many companies now, and I think it's becoming even more and more common now, there are interest groups. There are ways to essentially take on extracurricular roles within your company, and you can distinguish yourself in those ways as well. We don't have a lot of time left, but if anybody would like to to share any experiences they have in those kinds of roles. For example, I know that Jane is involved in an LGBTQ interest group, and also an Asian interest group at your company at Live Nation. Those are extra. They're not what you were assigned to do. They're not in your job description, and yet they enrich the company, and they also connect you with other people throughout the company, right? And so if you have any advice about that, or anything you want us to know, please let us know.
I would say I do have, so these kind of employee resource groups are huge and growing part of the corporate experience. It's kind of like joining a club, when you're in college. So I highly recommend them. My experience at my last startup, I was on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging board internally at our organization. And, I got to have, a monthly meeting where I was doing business directly with our company president, right at the table together, and my voice was being able to be represented. And so it's a great way to have impact and be able to work and get exposure to more seasoned folks inside of your organization that you can work with and learn from.
Great. Well, we have reached 1:25. A lot of people have class at 1:30 or meetings. So I'm just going to, close this up now. But thank you so much, Jane, Jesse, Derron, for giving us your time today, for giving us your advice, your wisdom, sharing that with us. It means a lot. If anybody has questions, follow-up questions, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and I know how to reach all of you. So I'm happy, anybody who's here, you can forward me your questions that you'd like forwarded on to these three wonderful panelists, and I will make sure they receive them. Thank you again for giving your time, and we'll give you a nice round of applause as we close for today. And thanks Honors Newsletter for organizing this fantastic event. Take care, everyone. Stay very safe, okay? Thanks again.
Bye.